Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, let's dive right into this, because today we are looking at a figure who completely rewrote the playbook for a massive global movement. We're talking about Ralph D. Winter, a man widely recognized as a major disruptor of global evangelical strategy in the 20th century. He basically looked at how an entire community was measuring their impact, realized they were using the completely wrong map, and changed their direction forever.
To understand just how deeply Winter disrupted the status quo, you really just need to listen to this core idea. The frontiers of mission are cultural, not merely geographical. Think about that for a second. This was a total conceptual earthquake. Before Winter, the sociological boundaries for this community were drawn with political lines, literal borders between countries. Winter stepped in and pointed out that human beings don't actually organize themselves just by political borders. They're organized by deep cultural and linguistic networks. This single objective observation fundamentally redefined how evangelical Christians understood world missions.
And the exact moment this idea took the world stage happened right here. In 1974, the International Congress on World Evangelization, which was organized through the leadership of Billy Graham and John Stott, gathered leaders from all around the globe in Lausanne, Switzerland. When Ralph D. Winter took the podium, it became the ultimate historical turning point for global missions. He presented this groundbreaking address that challenged the entire global church, pointing out that thousands of cultural and linguistic groups still remained completely isolated from their message. To this day, many historians regard his presentation at Lausanne as one of the most influential missionary speeches of the entire 20th century.
Section 1. Rethinking the Mission Map. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why that 1974 speech was such a massive turning point. We have to look at the traditional metrics of success that Winter was challenging. He was essentially asking an entire global organization to throw away their primary method of measuring progress. The old metric was simple geography. If an organization was operating in a specific country, they checked a box. Done. But Winter's new metric focused on distinct ethnic and cultural groups. He neutrally broke down the paradigm shift, observing that even within countries that had established churches, massive populations remained completely isolated due to profound cultural and linguistic barriers. He shifted the entire focus from geographic expansion over to cultural penetration.
This realization led directly to the crux of his 1974 Lausanne speech, and it really became the absolute foundation of his enduring legacy. It was an absolute aha moment for the movement. He popularized this specific concept, the unreached people group. Basically, these are populations with little or no indigenous Christian witness capable of reaching their own community. According to Winter, organizations needed to completely reprioritize their resources to focus on these specific groups rather than just sending more people to countries that already had a localized movement up and running.
Section 2. Engineering a new strategy.
So how exactly did someone come up with such a systemic critique of a centuries-old institution? Well, let's rewind a bit. Winter didn't think like a traditional theologian. He thought like a systems engineer. Born in Los Angeles in 1924, he grew up during the Great Depression, which really taught him immense perseverance and resourcefulness. He then actively combined engineering, theology, linguistics, and education at powerhouse schools like Caltech, Princeton, and Cornell. And then he took all of that high-level academic theory and tested it out on the ground during a 10-year span of missionary service in Guatemala. Those 10 years in Guatemala were literally an incubator for his later ideas. Rather than relying on outsiders to simply plant more institutions, his focus was entirely localized. We're talking leadership development, theological education, cross-cultural communication, and strengthening indigenous churches. This decade in the field fundamentally convinced him that local believers absolutely had to lead and sustain their own communities rather than relying on outsiders.
So the crucial point is that his on-the-ground experience completely solidified this core philosophy. The task is not merely to preach the gospel in every country, but to every people. You can really see how his fieldwork perfectly married up with his engineering mindset to produce the message he would eventually deliver to the world at the 1974 Lausanne Congress.
Section 3. Mobilizing the global movement.
Now, identifying a problem is one thing, right? But actually fixing it is a whole other ballgame. After successfully shifting the paradigm in 1974, Winter dedicated the rest of his life to operationalizing his vision into concrete, lasting institutions. Now, what's really interesting here is that just 2 short years after his paradigm-shifting speech at Lausanne, he didn't just sit back and write a few books. He took immediate action. And in 1976, he founded the U.S. Center for World Mission in Pasadena, California.
This center was specifically designed to be the operational hub for his new research-driven cultural strategy. It quickly became one of the world's leading institutions for missionary education. They weren't just guessing anymore. They were applying his engineering mindset to map the globe culturally. The center focused on highly practical goals, training missionaries, extensively researching these newly defined unreached people groups, publishing resources, and perhaps most importantly, encouraging cooperation among various mission agencies to tackle these distinct cross-cultural challenges together. And perhaps his most brilliant operational move of all was helping to develop the Perspectives on the World Christian Movement course. This wasn't just your standard college class. It was a massive mobilization tool that systematically trained hundreds of thousands of Christians globally. By walking students through 5 key themes, starting from the biblical basis and church history, straight through to cross-cultural ministry, mission strategy, and ultimately the challenge of unreached peoples, he effectively mass-produced his 1974 paradigm shift. Seriously, many global workers today can trace their entire career trajectory straight back to taking this specific course. Section 4. A lasting cultural legacy.
Looking back, it is crystal clear that Winter's impact went far beyond a single speech or a single institution. His was a lifelong dedication to changing how humanity connects across incredibly deep cultural divides. Ralph D. Winter passed away in Pasadena on May 20, 2009, at the age of 84, but he remained wildly active right up until the very end. Even well into his retirement, he was researching, mentoring younger leaders, and, surprisingly, expanding his focus. In his later years, he applied that same strategic mind to exploring how his community could address massive global issues like disease, poverty, and human suffering. Leaders around the world mourned his passing, widely recognizing him as one of the most significant thinkers of the modern era.
Which brings us to a final thought for you to consider today. By identifying that a political map tells us very little about true human connection, Winter totally revolutionized his field back in 1974. So looking at our highly connected, super-fast modern world through Winter's sociological lens, ask yourself, are the greatest barriers between people today geographical or are they cultural? It's a fascinating framework to apply to almost any global issue we're facing right now. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the maps you use to view the world.